Dying yelps of innocent dogs broadcasted across the galaxy, a cruel act of war that humanity will make the Wadi regret with their last breath. Captain Samuel Mitchell gripped the metal table, knuckles white, as classified mission details flashed before him. The ruthless Wadi had massacred defenseless canines on the human colony of Zephyr, broadcasting the torture far and wide. Mournful whimpers of man's best friend echoed in Samuel's mind. Citizens demanded blood. Humanity cried for vengeance against the Wadi barbarians. As the mission brief ended, Samuel reached down, stroking the fur of his own loyal Tibetan mastiff, Bosco. Trust shone in the dog's eyes. Samuel silently vowed to avenge the colony pups, or die trying. He set course for Wadi space, an ultimatum burning in his thoughts. Human history flickered on the ship's screens, tales of previous Wadi arrogance, of underestimating the sleeping giant of mankind. The Wadi had no idea of the hell they had just unleashed. Samuel gritted his teeth. He would deliver the ultimatum to those heartless Wadi scum, and if they didn't run, humanity would bathe the galaxy in their blood, for those poor murdered pooches, for the weeping children robbed of furry friends. This time the Wadi had gone too far. This time mankind would teach them true meaning of fear. Samuel glared at the swirling nebulas as the ISS Retribution rocketed towards the Wadi frontier. One way or another, the mutts of Zephyr colony would be avenged. As the ISS Retribution hurtled through the cold darkness of space, a single light glowed in the captain's quarters. Samuel hunched over his desk, his eyes fixed on the classified files displayed before him. The images and reports painted a chilling picture of humanity's first encounter with the Wadi, a moment that had sealed the fate of both species. 5 years ago, the UNS Friendship, a vessel of exploration and hope, had ventured into uncharted space, seeking new allies and opportunities for mankind. Instead, they found only horror and death at the hands of the Wadi. Without warning or provocation, the alien warships had attacked, their weapons tearing through the Friendship's hull like paper. The crew, unprepared for such savagery, had been slaughtered where they stood. Only a handful of survivors, including a young ensign named Rega, had been taken prisoner by the Wadi. For months they had languished in alien cells, their fate unknown to the rest of humanity. Then, one day, Regor's broken body had been dumped on the doorstep of a human embassy, a gruesome message from the Wadi. The images of Regor's injuries, the scars and brands that covered his once healthy flesh, were seared into Samuel's memory, a testament to the Wadi's cruelty. In a desperate attempt to save the remaining prisoners, human diplomats had traveled to the Wadi homeworld under the guise of peace talks, but what they found there had chilled them to the bone. The Wadi, in their twisted idea of entertainment, were forcing their captives to fight in brutal gladiatorial games, pitting them against vicious alien predators for the amusement of the Wadi elite. The peace talks had quickly deteriorated, the diplomats barely escaping with their lives. Since then, the Wadi had only grown bolder, staging increasingly brazen attacks on human outposts and trade ships. And now, with the slaughter of innocent dogs on Zephyr colony, they had crossed a line from which there could be no return. Samuel knew that the Wadi's cruelty was a deliberate taunt, a message that they believed humans to be weak and easily cowed. But as Samuel stroked Bosco's fur, feeling the loyal dog's warmth beneath his fingers, his lips curled into a grim smile. The Wadi, in their arrogance, had badly miscalculated. They had no idea of the depths of loyalty and love that humans held for their canine companions, no concept of the fury they had unleashed. Rising from his desk, Samuel made his way to the Retribution's armory, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. As he reviewed the ship's extensive arsenal, a plan began to take shape in his mind, a plan as cold as it was terrifying. The Wadi would soon learn the true meaning of fear, would come to understand the terrible mistake they had made in provoking the wrath of humanity. Samuel's eyes glinted in the harsh light of the armory, his face set in a mask of grim determination. One way or another, the dogs of Zephyr colony would be avenged, and the Wadi would pay for their crimes in blood. "Listen up," Samuel said, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "We're not just here to deliver an ultimatum. We're here to send a message, one that the Wadi will never forget." He tapped a command into the holographic display, bringing up a schematic of a massive fortified structure. "This is Base Zeta 9, a key Wadi military installation. Intel suggests that it's the nerve center of their entire operation in this sector. If we can infiltrate the base and sabotage their central command network, we'll cripple their ability to coordinate their forces. It'll leave them vulnerable to a swift, decisive counterstrike." Samuel paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But I won't lie to you, the risks are enormous. Zeta 9 is heavily guarded by the Wadi's most elite troops. If we're captured—" He trailed off, his expression darkening. They all knew what the Wadi were capable of, the horrors they inflicted on their prisoners. "This mission is voluntary. I won't order any of you to undertake such a dangerous operation against your will. But if we succeed, we'll be striking a blow for every human who has suffered at the hands of the Wadi, for every friend, every loved one we've lost to their cruelty." For a long moment the bridge was silent. Then, one by one, the crew members stepped forward. The engineer, Mikhail, his face etched with determination. The medic, Sasha, her eyes shining with unshed tears. The weapons specialist, Jisoo, his jaw set with grim resolve. They were all volunteers, united in their desire to make the Wadi pay for their crimes. As the ISS Retribution slipped deeper into Wadi territory, Samuel and his team began their final preparations. In the armory, they checked and double-checked their weapons and gear, knowing that even the smallest malfunction could spell disaster. In the infirmary, Sasha stockpiled medical supplies, steeling herself for the inevitable casualties. And in his quarters, Samuel sat hunched over his desk, poring over schematics of Base Zeta 9, running through every possible scenario in his mind. Beside him, Bosco whined softly, sensing his master's anxiety. Samuel reached out to scratch the big dog behind the ears, drawing strength from his steady presence. He knew that what they were about to attempt was reckless, perhaps even foolhardy, but he also knew that sometimes the only way to fight monsters was to become a monster yourself. And as he looked at the images of the slaughtered dogs of Zephyr Colony, their innocent faces forever stilled, he felt a cold, terrible rage settle over him. The Wadi had sown the wind. Now they would reap the whirlwind. The sleek black stealth shuttle slid silently from the ISS Retribution's launch bay, its advanced cloaking tech rendering it a mere shimmer against the starry void. Inside, Samuel and his team sat strapped in, faces grim in the dim red light of the cabin. As the craft knifed into the planet's atmosphere, the only sound was the soft exhalations of the hardened soldiers, each readying themselves for the grim task ahead. The shuttle touched down with barely a whisper, its dampeners absorbing the roar of the engines. Boots hit soil as Samuel and his team emerged into the dense jungle, the humid air instantly clinging to their matte black armor. They moved swiftly, silently, the undergrowth seeming to part before them as they advanced on the looming silhouette of Base Zeta 9. As they reached the perimeter, a shimmering energy barrier rose before them, a high-tech force field encasing the Wadi installation in an impenetrable dome. Samuel silently signaled to Hawkins, the team's tech specialist, who set to work, his fingers flying over the field's control panel. The seconds dragged by, each one an eternity as Hawkins fought to breach the Wadi's security. Samuel's finger tightened on his rifle's trigger, every instinct screaming at him to retreat. But just as he opened his mouth to give the order, the force field flickered and died, winking out of existence. The team surged forward, hugging the shadows of the compound's structures. Suddenly, an ear-splitting klaxon shattered the night, floodlights blazing to life and pinning the infiltrators in their harsh glare. Samuel cursed. The Wadi had detected them. Their cover was blown. "Split up, stick to the plan," he barked into his comm, already moving. "We won't get a second chance at this." Samuel sprinted for the central command building, his heart pounding in his ears as he dodged patrols of heavily armed Wadi soldiers. He dispatched those he couldn't avoid with brutal efficiency, his silenced weapon coughing in the night. As he neared his target, a sound reached his ears that froze the blood in his veins. A whimper, weak and pitiful, unmistakably canine. His gut turned to ice as the realization hit him. The Wadi had brought dogs here, and from the sounds of pain echoing down the corridor, their cruelty knew no bounds. Rage, pure and blinding, surged through Samuel's veins. This was no longer just a mission. It was personal now. The Wadi would pay for their crimes. He would make sure of it, even if he had to tear this place apart with his bare hands. Samuel sprints down the dimly lit corridor, his heart pounding in his ears as the desperate whimpers grow louder with each step. The sounds of suffering cut through him like a knife, fueling his rage against the Wadi's cruelty. As he rounds the corner, he spots the reinforced door, flanked by 2 heavily armed guards. Without breaking stride, Samuel lunges at the first guard, his knife flashing in the low light. The Wadi soldier barely has time to raise his weapon before the blade finds his throat, silencing him forever. The second guard manages to get off a shot, the energy bolt sizzling past Samuel's ear as he ducks and rolls. Coming up in a crouch, Samuel fires his own weapon, the shot catching the Wadi square in the chest and sending him crumpling to the ground. With the guards dispatched, Samuel turns his attention to the door's control panel. His fingers fly over the alien interface, his mind racing as he tries to decipher the Wadi's security protocols. Every second feels like an eternity, the pitiful cries from beyond the door urging him to hurry. Finally, with a hiss of hydraulics, the heavy door slides open, revealing the horror within. The room is a nightmarish tableau of suffering and cruelty. Cages line the walls, each one containing a terrified, whimpering dog. Many of the animals bear the scars of brutal experimentation, their once healthy coats matted with blood and filth. The air is thick with the stench of fear and pain, a cloying miasma that threatens to overwhelm Samuel's senses. In the center of the room stands a massive Wadi, his hands stained crimson with the blood of his victims. He looks up as Samuel enters, his eyes glinting with malevolent amusement. "Fair human," he sneers in heavily accented English. "Come to join your precious pets?" Samuel doesn't bother with a response. He simply raises his weapon and fires, the shot taking the Wadi cleanly between the eyes. The alien crumples to the floor, his cruel laughter forever silenced. Wasting no time, Samuel rushes to the cages, his heart breaking at the sight of the abused animals. He knows he can't save them all, but he refuses to leave even one behind to suffer at the hands of the Wadi. With gentle hands, he begins opening the cages, lifting the weakened dogs into his arms. Many are too frail to stand, their bodies ravaged by the Wadi's experiments. But even in their pain, they manage to lick Samuel's hands and face, their tails wagging feebly as if in gratitude. Tears sting Samuel's eyes as he cradles them close, whispering words of comfort and reassurance. Suddenly his comm crackles to life, urgent voices demanding his status. Samuel knows he needs to get back to the mission, to complete the sabotage that will cripple the Wadi's ability to wage war. But as he looks into the pleading eyes of the dogs in his arms, he knows he can't abandon them. Making a split-second decision, he calls for the stealth shuttle to break off from its holding pattern and come in for an emergency evacuation. He will not leave a single dog behind, even if it means jeopardizing the entire operation. As he waits for the shuttle to arrive, Samuel sets about planting the charges that will reduce the command center to rubble. His hands move with practiced efficiency, even as his mind remains focused on the precious cargo he has sworn to protect. He knows that his actions here will have consequences, that he may well be sacrificing the mission for the sake of these innocent lives, but in this moment, surrounded by the suffering and cruelty of the Wadi, nothing matters more than saving these dogs and striking a blow against the evil that would so callously torture them. The shuttle touches down just outside the compound, its cloaking field shimmering in the harsh glare of the floodlights. Samuel carries the dogs out 2 at a time, his arms burning with the strain, but his resolve unwavering. He will not rest until every last one is safely aboard. As the last dog is loaded into the shuttle, Samuel takes one final look around the nightmarish room, his eyes hardening with determination. The Wadi will pay for their crimes, he vows silently. Not just for the atrocities committed against these innocent creatures, but for every act of cruelty and aggression they have perpetrated against humanity. With a final nod to the shuttle pilot, Samuel turns and sprints back into the heart of the compound, the timer on the charges ticking down with each passing second. He knows he is cutting it close, that he may well be sealing his own fate. But if this is to be his end, he will face it gladly, knowing that he has struck a blow for justice and compassion in a universe too often ruled by brutality and fear. The shuttle lifts off, its precious cargo secure, as Samuel disappears into the maze of corridors, his fate uncertain, but his purpose clear. One way or another, the Wadi will learn the true cost of their cruelty, and if it takes Samuel's last breath to teach them that lesson, then so be it. The stealth shuttle shimmered into view, touching down beside the shattered entrance to the Wadi compound. Samuel and his team emerged from the shadows, their arms laden with the whimpering, trembling forms of the abused dogs. They moved swiftly, urgency lending speed to their steps as they loaded their precious cargo into the waiting craft. But even as the last of the dogs was secured, Samuel's comm crackled to life, a voice heavy with dread filling his ear. "Captain, we've got a problem. Sensors are picking up a massive energy surge from the far side of the planet. It's a Wadi dreadnought, sir, and it's powering up weapons." Samuel's blood ran cold, a sinking realization settling in his gut. The Wadi had been waiting for them, anticipating their every move. This whole mission, the facility, the dogs, it had all been bait in a carefully laid trap. And now, with the jaws closing around them, the ISS Retribution was caught squarely in the crosshairs. On the bridge of the human ship, chaos reigned as the crew scrambled to battle stations. Shields thrummed to life, weapon systems humming as they tracked the looming form of the Wadi dreadnought. But even as they prepared to fight, a grim realization settled over the crew. They were outmatched, outgunned. The Wadi ship dwarfed the Retribution, its hull bristling with advanced weaponry and shielding that put their own to shame. Their only chance, slim though it might be, was to outmaneuver the behemoth, to dance around its bulk and strike at weak points. It was a desperate gambit, but it was all they had. Below on the planet's surface, Samuel and his team fought their way back to the shuttle, the weight of the mission hanging heavy on their shoulders. They had to complete the sabotage to give the Retribution a fighting chance, but as they rounded the final corner, they found their path blocked by a wall of Wadi elite guards, a massive, scarred warrior at their head. The Wadi commander's eyes glinted with cruel amusement as he took in the sight of the humans, arms laden with whimpering dogs. "Pathetic," he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "You risk your lives for these worthless creatures. You humans are even weaker than I thought." Samuel gently lowered the dog in his arms to the ground, his eyes never leaving the Wadi's face. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but filled with a quiet, deadly rage. "No," he said, "mercy is not weakness. Compassion is not cowardice. You think you know strength, but you know nothing. You are the ones who are weak, preying on the innocent, reveling in cruelty." He straightened, his gaze hardening. "We are here to show you the true strength of humanity." With those words, the humans launched themselves at the Wadi, a clash of steel and flesh, laser and blade. They fought with a fury born of righteous anger, each blow fueled by the memory of the tortured dogs, of the countless lives lost to Wadi aggression. The battle was fierce, the elite guards falling one by one beneath the onslaught, but even as they fell, the Wadi commander remained, his energy blade crackling as it met Samuel's combat knife in a deadly embrace. Above them, the ISS Retribution and the Wadi dreadnought danced a deadly waltz, the void lit by the flare of weapons fire and the shimmer of straining shields. The fate of both crews, of the mission, of the very future of the war, hung in the balance, poised on the knife's edge between victory and annihilation. The Wadi commander snarled as Samuel's deft maneuver sent the energy blade flying. Clawed hands shot out lightning fast, grasping for Samuel's throat. Samuel blocked desperately, the two combatants tumbling across the blood-slicked floor in a frenzied grapple. Laser fire sizzled overhead as human and Wadi troops clashed, the air thick with smoke and screams. Amid the chaos, a shrill yelp pierced Samuel's heart. His eyes darted to see a small terrier, one of the tortured dogs they'd rescued, latch onto the leg of a Wadi about to gun down a human soldier. The Wadi's shot went wide as he staggered, the terrier's teeth sunk deep. A burst of return fire from the human ended the Wadi, but the little dog lay still, a final whimper escaping its throat. Grief and fury surged through Samuel's veins, boiling over into a roar of primal rage. He heaved with all his strength, throwing the Wadi commander's bulk off him. Seizing the fallen energy blade, Samuel rose to tower over his foe. The commander's eyes widened in sudden naked fear as the human advanced, the blade thrumming with lethal power. Chest heaving, Samuel stood over his fallen enemy, the battle rage slowly draining from his blood. Around him, his team emerged victorious. The last Wadi sprawled dead or fled, but the win was bitter. Wounded humans groaned, and amid the fallen lay the little terrier, still at last. Tears stung Samuel's eyes as he gathered the tiny body in his arms, cradling it gently. He carried it back to the waiting shuttle, where the other rescued dogs whined and whimpered. As the craft lifted off, Samuel looked back on the devastation they'd wrought. The command center lay in ruins, the Wadi's coordination crippled. But Samuel knew it was only the beginning. The Wadi would never let this attack go unanswered. Aboard the embattled ISS Retribution, the crew fought desperately to hold their own against the dreadnought's onslaught. Shields failing, the hull shuddering under the hammer blows, they knew they couldn't last much longer. Suddenly a titanic explosion rocked the Wadi ship, sending it lurching drunkenly. The Retribution's sensors screamed to life, detecting multiple new contacts dropping out of hyperspace on all sides. The cavalry had arrived, the rest of humanity's fleet, guns blazing as they moved to engage the enemy. The tide of battle shifting, the Retribution surged forward to press the attack, straining. As the rest of the human fleet engaged the crippled Wadi dreadnought, the behemoth buckled under the onslaught. Lasers and missiles tore into its hull, ripping through decks and bulkheads. The once mighty warship shuddered and convulsed, secondary explosions blossoming along its length. From the bridge of the ISS Retribution, Samuel watched in grim satisfaction as the dreadnought broke apart, its fragments spinning off into the void. The remaining Wadi ships, their resolve shattered by the loss of their flagship, turned tail and fled, jumping into hyperspace to escape the wrath of the humans. But Samuel had little time to savor the victory. On the planet's surface, the ground heaved and shook beneath the stealth shuttle's landing gear. As Samuel and his team hastily loaded the rescued dogs, a massive crack opened up, swallowing the remains of base Zeta 9. "They've triggered a self-destruct," Samuel shouted over the roar of the quake. "We need to get out of here now." The shuttle lifted off, fighting against the violent upheaval. Rocks and debris pinged off the hull as Samuel wrestled with the controls, guiding the craft through the maelstrom. In the back, the dogs whimpered and huddled together, their eyes wide with fear. The shuttle bucked and shuddered as it clawed for altitude, the planet seemingly determined to drag them down into its death throes. But Samuel's skill and the craft's powerful engines won out. They broke through the atmosphere, leaving the doomed world behind. As the shuttle approached the ISS Retribution, Samuel's heart sank. The ship was badly damaged, its hull pitted and scorched. Several decks were open to space, the edges of the breaches still glowing from the heat of the Wadi's weapons. The shuttle docked, and Samuel and his team disembarked with their precious cargo. The captain met them, his face grim. "We struck a blow against the Wadi today," he said, "but the cost was high. Many didn't make it." Samuel nodded, the weight of those lost lives heavy on his shoulders. "But we showed them that we won't stand for their cruelty, that we'll fight for those who can't fight for themselves." As if on cue, the ship's alarms blared to life. The sensors had detected multiple Wadi ships dropping out of hyperspace on the edge of the system. The ISS Retribution, battered and broken, was in no shape for another fight. Samuel felt a cold knot of fear in his gut. They had won the battle, but the war was just beginning, and the humans were far from ready. As the battered remnants of the human fleet limped through the void, the weight of their Pyrrhic victory hung heavy on the survivors. The once proud ships bore the scars of battle, their hulls scorched and pitted, a testament to the ferocity of the fighting and the terrible price they had paid. On the bridge of the flagship, the acting captain, a haggard, hollow-eyed man who had seen too much death, stared out at the stars, his mind replaying the final moments of Samuel and Bosco's sacrifice over and over. Around him, the bridge crew worked in somber silence, tending to the ship's wounds, mourning their fallen comrades. The journey back to Earth was a solemn one. Each light year crossed a reminder of how far they had come and how much they had lost. When they finally arrived, the sight of their blue-green homeworld filled the viewports, a bittersweet welcome for the weary warriors. They were greeted as heroes, the people of Earth lining the streets to cheer their brave defenders. But for the survivors of the battle, the accolades rang hollow. They knew that their victory had come at a terrible cost, and that the respite would be short-lived. In the days that followed, as the fleet licked its wounds and the humans mourned their dead, a grim truth began to emerge. Intercepted communications, decoded by the finest minds Earth had to offer, painted a chilling picture of the Wadi's true motives. The attack on the human colony, the torture of the innocent dogs, it had all been a deliberate provocation, a calculated ploy to draw humanity into a conflict they could not win. The Wadi, it seemed, had grown wary of the humans' growing strength, their rapid technological advancements and expanding influence. To the Wadi, the humans were a threat, a potential rival for dominance of the galaxy, and so they had sought to crush them, to break their spirit and their resolve before they could become too powerful. But the Wadi, in their arrogance, had underestimated their foe. They had not reckoned on the depth of the humans' bond with their canine companions, the fury that such cruelty would unleash. They had not anticipated the courage and sacrifice of warriors like Samuel and Bosco. And now, with humanity bloodied but unbroken, the Wadi were preparing for a final assault, a devastating strike aimed at the very heart of human civilization. Their ships, vast and terrible, were already on the move, their course set for Earth. In the face of this looming threat, the human fleet mobilized once more. Every available ship and every able-bodied crew member called into service. They knew they were outmatched, that they could not hope to defeat the full might of the Wadi Armada. But they were determined to make the invaders pay for every inch of human soil, to fight to the last in defense of their homeworld. As the Wadi ships entered Earth's orbit and began their bombardment, the human fleet engaged in a desperate, vicious battle. The void lit up with the fire of ships dying, human and Wadi alike torn apart by the fury of their weapons. On the surface, the cities of Earth burned, millions perishing in the ruins as the Wadi's ruthless assault continued. But even in the face of annihilation, the humans fought on, driven by a love for their home and a fierce determination to protect all they held dear. In the streets, in the skies, in the very rubble of their cities, they battled the Wadi invaders, fighting with a savage bravery that would echo through the ages. They fought for their families, for their way of life, for the memory of the fallen. They fought for the ideals that Samuel and Bosco had embodied in their final moments, the ideals of courage, of sacrifice, of standing firm against cruelty and injustice no matter the cost. And though they fell in the end, their cities shattered and their defenses breached, they did so with their heads held high, knowing that they had given their all in defense of their world and their principles. As the Wadi established their brutal occupation, enslaving the survivors and stripping Earth of its resources, the remnants of humanity went underground, forming a resistance that would carry on the fight for generations to come. In hidden bases and secret meetings, they kept alive the memory of Earth's fallen heroes and plotted their revenge against the hated invaders. They taught their children of the Wadi's cruelty, instilling in them a burning desire for justice and freedom. They told stories of Samuel and Bosco's bravery and of all those who had given their lives in defense of humanity's ideals. And though the war had been lost, Though Earth lay shattered and enslaved, the humans never lost hope. They knew that as long as even a single human drew breath, the fight would go on. That someday, no matter how long it took, they would rise again and reclaim what was theirs. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.